So officially welcome to everybody. We're going to open the cafe, and this is part two of a two-part series discussing gut health, an incredibly important topic, especially now with everybody understanding how important immunity is. So last week, Chantal took us through a lovely understanding of the physiology of the gut and positioning the why, because once you have a really strong why, it's so much easier to find a how. And today is around, okay, so how do we actually improve our gut health? So Chantal has got a few slides prepped, and we will definitely have time for some questions. If you have any questions in the meantime, I'll keep my eye on the chat. So you're also welcome to write down questions there. And then I'll turn those over to Chantal. And Chantal, welcome again.
Wonderful. Thank you, Celynn. Hi, everybody. We're going to start with a few deep breaths. So last week, we had one hand on the chest, one hand on the belly, and I had asked you when you were breathing to become aware of whether it was your chest or your belly that moved more. And just as a recap, belly breathing stimulates the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is very much about the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest, repair, relaxation part of the autonomic nervous system. So the other thing that activates the vagus nerve and our rest and relaxation or parasympathetic is humming. So what we're going to do today is a few deep breaths, in through the nose, out through the nose. So no mouth breathing, because again, nasal breathing stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. So the concentration is right hand over your heart, left hand onto your belly, breathing in and out through your nose, concentrating on the belly hand rising more than the right hand on your chest. And as you exhale, you're going to hum. So perhaps everyone can put themselves on mute so that we don't distract each other. And you can go at your own pace, and we'll do 2 or 3 breaths, or 3 or 4 breaths, in through the nose, out through the nose, and as you exhale, humming and ensuring that your belly hand rises more than your chest hand. Okay, good. So just a quick recap. Let me just do this. Slide. Last week, we chatted about 2 very important things. The first was our healthy gut bacteria, known as the gut microbiome. And we spoke about the importance of volume and diversity for our gut microbiome. So this beautiful rainforest image is what we should keep in our minds in terms of how a healthy gut bacteria should look. Lots of volume and lots of diversity. We also spoke about leaky gut, which is when we get gap junctions between that single layer of epithelial cells that forms the wall of our gastrointestinal tract, and when toxins that should remain in the gut can then easily pass into the bloodstream and set up low-grade inflammation in the body. So the next image is what your gut bacteria will look like and what your digestive tract will look like if you have leaky gut. So it's barren, it's deserted, it's dry, it's dead. Its capacity for absorption and extraction of micronutrients from food becomes very limited. So just to recap on the important function of the gut microbiome and not having leaky gut, meaning that the epithelial cells of the gut wall form a filter or a barrier. So to have a healthy gut means you produce vitamin B, produce vitamin K, increase the absorption of calcium and iron, that your immune system is good, and remembering that your gut bacteria influence the hormones in the body because they produce all the precursors for our hormones. So leptin and ghrelin are the two hormones that control satiety and hunger. So any upset of the gut microbiome will affect your cravings and your hunger. And then the important thing is serotonin, that 90% of serotonin in the body is produced in the gut. And today we are going to talk about the gut-brain axis, which is via the enteric nervous system, is the nervous system of the gut, and it is connected to the brain via the vagus nerve. So that's known as the GBA, or the gut-brain axis, which is a direct impact on our mood and on our cognitive function. Okay, so what our focus today is on the importance of fiber. So the image on the left-hand side is those yummy, delicious foods that we all drawn to, and especially during lockdown. So those middle shelves of the grocery stores were empty during lockdown. So that was all the breads and the biscuits and the cake mixtures and all of those things, where the outside aisles, which are the fresh fruits and vegetables, were not being consumed as much. But if you all remember back to when Tim Noakes came out with the banting philosophy, that Woolies, which for those of you who are, I don't know, UK based, I guess is Marks and Spencer's, but Woolies sold out of bread, and cauliflower sales quadrupled as people became aware that carbohydrates were a challenge. So what we're focusing on today is the importance of fiber. So when you take a probiotic, probiotics contain natural healthy bacteria, where we are using fermented food as a probiotic, which would restore our natural gut bacteria. So the inclusion of fermented food into our diet every day is very important because of all the lifestyle things that can actually destroy our healthy gut bacteria. Then if you've heard of prebiotics, prebiotics is fiber. And the prebiotics, and it's specifically insoluble fiber, and that is what the gut bacteria live on. So just a quick reminder that those lifestyle factors which destroy our gut bacteria and lead to that barren looking, dysfunctional, imbalanced gut microbiome would be antibiotics, both medicinal and what's in chicken, meat, and fish. It's unfiltered water. It's pesticides on non-organic fruit and vegetables. It's hydrogenated fat in our diet. It's diets high in refined sugar. It's chronic medication. It's anti-inflammatories, and the list goes on. It's artificial sweeteners, so that will cause destruction of your gut microbiome. So even if you avoid all of those nuclear bombs of lifestyle, you really live a very strict lifestyle and you avoid all of those, and you take your probiotics every day. If you don't have sufficient fiber in your diet or prebiotics, your gut bacteria will still die. Fiber is the only thing that keeps those gut bacteria alive. So it needs to be a combination of keeping your diet filled with probiotics, fermented food, apple cores, organic fruits and vegetables, and then ensuring that you have sufficient fiber. Okay, so this image, just to tell you the detail, the red is the gut microbiome, the blue is the blood, the light blue is the epithelial cell layer, and the green is the mucus that the gut bacteria produce. So remembering that in the large intestine, the light blue layer, which is your epithelial cell, and that mucus layer is what separates what's in the gut from what's in the blood. So we all know that saying of good fences make great neighbors. So we do not want red and blue to be mixing. Red is healthy when in the gut. Blue is healthy when in the blood vessels. We don't want blood in our gastrointestinal tract, and we don't want food, toxins, or gut bacteria to move through the mucus or the epithelial cell layers into the blood. So the next image is showing you what happens when you eat fiber. So the yellow is indicating fiber. So when the gut bacteria have fiber that they are eating, they produce more mucus, and you can see that the thickness of the fence, in other words, the separation between the red, which is the gut, and the blue, which is the blood, is much thicker in the second image than in the first. Okay, so what we eat matters and our lifestyle matters. So this is very important, and it was actually in this context that this discussion in Resilience Cafe came about, because we were talking about mood and the effect of meditation and breathing and stress-free lifestyles. And then we got on to chatting about the importance of the gut in maintaining a healthy mood and a healthy approach. So the way in which the microbiota, or the microbiome, which is the gut, the way that that links to the brain is first of all via the vagus nerve. So there's a vagus nerve on the left and a vagus nerve on the right. And the vagus nerve connects the enteric nervous system, which is the nervous system in the gut, directly to the brain. So for those of us who have experienced butterflies, like if you're about to give a big presentation and you get butterflies, that's the connection of the enteric nervous system to the brain. Then remembering that 70% of our immune system is in our gut. So that's the macrophages, the leukocytes, etc. And they have a direct communication with the brain. So just as you can get leaky gut, you can also get leaky brain. And leaky brain is when toxins, especially heavy metals, so mercury, aluminium, lead, etc., can move from the blood vessels into the brain cells, and that can give us cognitive decline, as well as dementia and Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. They all related, leaky gut and leaky brain, to each other. Okay, then short chain fatty acids, when the gut bacteria are feeding on insoluble fiber, the byproduct of that is called short chain fatty acids. So the shortening is SCFA, short chain fatty acids, and those are natural anti-inflammatories for the body. So the more fiber you eat, the more the gut bacteria break them down, the more you produce natural anti-inflammatories. So the irony is that ibuprofen and the like, so the cataflams and all of those things that are sold so readily over the counter, they destroy your gut microbiome. And actually, if you were to increase fiber in your diet when you were experiencing pain, you would have natural anti-inflammatories produced by your gut bacteria. So that's why a fruit and vegetable diet and nuts and seeds is termed an anti-inflammatory diet. Okay, then we have the tryptophan serotonin mood regulator. So remembering that serotonin is produced in the gut. So any psychiatrist who advocates SSRIs for a person who's depressed and doesn't send that person to a nutritionist or a health coach to get their gut right, they are leaving out a massive component of the cause of so obviously there are other environmental factors as well, but which comes first, the cart or the horse, or the chicken or the egg? No, the horse always comes before the cart, but which comes first, the chicken or the egg, is about whether the leaky gut produced the depression, or whether the mood of the depression then resulted in leaky gut, but they always go hand in hand. And then remembering that at night, serotonin is converted into melatonin, and melatonin is the rest and repair hormone. So if you have low serotonin, you're also going to have low melatonin, and then your deep REM sleep is affected, and that also has a big effect on the yeah, okay. Sorry, I just need to get rid of this. Okay, so this image is showing you that in the past, the approach to psychological dysfunction was psychotherapy and medication, and it was really blamed on chronic stress and the susceptibility in the genes to some kind of mental dysfunction or some kind of mental illness. And the present approach is to understand that there are many things that contribute, and that there is a direct relationship between the brain and the gut, and that it is chronic stress, it's antibiotics, it's poor diet, it's unhealthy lifestyle, and that the way to improve any kind of mental dysfunction or mental illness is a healthy diet. Psychobiotics is referring to that connection between the gut and the brain. Prebiotics, which is the fiber that produces the short chain fatty acids, and then FMT is a microbiome transplant. So it's fecal microbiome transplant. So that's where microbiome from a healthy person is transplanted into an ill person, and then the ill person is receiving the diversity of gut bacteria from the healthy person, and they get an increased production of serotonin and feel much better. So in America, those are called capsules. I can't remember if we discussed that last week, but we can talk about that more later. Okay, I'm getting stuck here.
I sometimes have that happen to me too, where the screen kind of freezes. And this, are you struggling to change the slide?
I'm having a screen freeze moment. Okay, let's see where we are now. Here we go. Okay, so these are, in inverted commas, what we think are normal symptoms. So many of us will feel run down, or we wake up tired. So you've slept the whole night and you get out of bed in the morning and you either need that coffee or you just feel like you don't have that get up and go. Chronic fatigue, brain fog is a big one. So I have my phone on my ear, I'm talking to someone, but I'm looking for my phone. Or I come into a room and I forget what I've come into the room for. That's brain fog. And then depression and anxiety, poor sleep. So the signs of irritable bowel syndrome, the gas, the bloating, the diarrhea, the cramping, acne. So I think that this list of things is just indicating that when you have leaky gut or a dysbiosis of the gut microbiome, we tend to think that the symptoms are going to be related to the abdomen. So the irritable bowel syndrome type symptoms, but we perhaps are not aware that having a breakout of acne or eczema or psoriasis or chronic fatigue or migraines are also all indications of leaky gut and dysbiosis of the gut microbiome. So other things that would indicate that there's a dysfunction: insulin resistance, weight gain, joint pain, hormonal imbalances, all the autoimmune diseases. So those are always linked to leaky gut. So that's your rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's, type 1 diabetes, Crohn's disease, all those conditions that fall under autoimmune disease. And then not only vitamin B12 deficiency, but any vitamin B deficiency. Okay, so the basic summary of, you can heal leaky gut in 21 days. So why do we say 21 days? Because those epithelial cells that make up the wall of the gut replace themselves every 3 to 4 days. So in 21 days, you've had 6 or 7 cycles of cell repair. And if you are avoiding the nuclear bombs, the antibiotics, the refined sugar, the hydrogenated fat, the unfiltered tap water, every time a cycle of cell repair occurs, a better quality cell will be produced. And by the end of 21 days, there will be no gap junctions. The cells will then be on top of each other and the filter will be formed again. So that's the healing of the hyperpermeable gut wall takes 21 days. And then to reintroduce, or what we call reseed, our gut bacteria is to ensure that we take daily probiotics. So there is a move away from taking probiotics from a plastic container that's produced in a lab, and more towards natural probiotics, which are your fermented foods. So we talked about kombucha, kimchi, kvass, sauerkraut, kefir, and then the foods that contain high amounts of probiotics. So natural gut bacteria is the core of an apple. So in certain societies, I think we spoke about this last week, we tend to eat around the apple and throw the core away, but it's actually in the core that the healthy gut bacteria exist. And then the soil is not eating spoonfuls of soil, but having traces of organic soil on organic fruit and veg, because soil is to the earth what the gut microbiome is to the body. So the emphasis of healing leaky gut, 21 days of avoiding the nuclear bombs and restoring any imbalance in the gut bacteria by daily intake of probiotics. That's not over a period of time, but forever and ever and ever. That our palates need to be less orientated towards salt and sugar, which they are in 21st century, and more towards bitter and sweet, bitter and sour, which is the inclusion of fermented foods in our diet. And then, of course, it is daily prebiotics, and that's your dietary fiber. So the average person in current 21st century living, what's called SAD, or the standard American diet, or the standard Australian diet, or the standard African diet, is actually less than 30 grams of fiber a day. And what your gut bacteria need is in excess of 80 grams, which would be a combination of soluble and insoluble fiber. And then as the gut bacteria feed on it, it produces natural anti-inflammatories called short chain fatty acids. And yeah, I think that we'll finish at that point and open for questions. And it's really that simple, is to remember that every time we eat, we're either fueling disease or we're fueling health. And I think that's it sounds so simple, but it's difficult to implement. We all know that we should be doing 100 sit-ups and 10 push-ups, and we all know how to do them. And why is it that we don't do them? And those are so many of the lifestyle barriers. And to be within a community where we all are growing our stuff, like Celynn is growing her seeds and her sprouts, and we all checking our transit time intermittently with our sesame seeds, and sharing recipes on fermented foods, the best recipe for kimchi or kombucha or making kefir. It becomes a part of how we live and a part of lifestyle. And that's such an important thing in sustainability of a particular way of living. So yeah, that brings us to the end of the presentation. And if there are any questions, I would love to hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chantal. I think I've got a few questions. But before we do that, did anybody do the sesame seed test? And who was not here last week? The sesame seed test was swallow a teaspoon of white sesame seeds and notice when you see them in the toilet. So we had a conversation around how important it is to actually have some kind of relationship with your poop. Was that the way you refer to it? Interesting to notice that I'm not comfortable saying that myself. And I had to do the damn test 3 times because I forgot to look.
It doesn't work so well on black sesame seeds, I can tell you that.
But on that question, is there a recommended transit time?
16 hours is the sweet spot.
Oh, okay. So thank you for that. That was my question.
Just to remind you that if it's faster than that, it means that food is moving through your digestive system too fast to allow for adequate breakdown, extraction, and absorption. And if it's taking longer than that, it means that your gut is very sluggish and that too much fermentation is being produced. So as an example, gastric reflux is actually when food stays in the stomach for too long, and it's actually the gases that come back. So it's not too much stomach acid, it's too little stomach acid. Oh. So those proton pump inhibitors, the enos and the Gaviscon and all of those things, Very, very harmful to your gut bacteria, very harmful.
And Chantal, how do you feel about colonic irrigations? Because I often get asked that.
So colonic irrigations are absolutely wonderful, especially if you do a coffee enema, because it's the best way to detox the liver. But understanding that a colonic irrigation will upset your gut bacteria. So it's important that before you have the colonic irrigation, that you are making a concerted effort with fermented foods. And obviously after the colonic irrigation, just to ensure that you reseed your natural microbiome.
Yeah, that's the key, because I know a lot of people sometimes have the irrigations done and they don't spend time with the nutritionist to fix it afterwards, and then you can cause more damage. Tell us a little bit about the 21-day protocol, or should we be like speaking to you individually?
Yes, definitely, because it's very much an individual. So we say 21 days, but it's you know, if it was as easy as here's the recipe of how you do it, we would all be doing our 100 sit-ups and our 10 push-ups every day. So it's taking where our lifestyle is at, understanding the barriers, because certainly to move away from those nuclear bombs requires a change of the way you cook, the way you shop, what your pantry looks like, what your fridge looks like. Is it only you? Is there a family? How are you going to prepare the meals to ensure that everybody's getting adequate nutrition and that nobody's grumpy because of what's being served for dinner?
So I have a suggestion. I'd like to create some breakout rooms, perhaps for just a brief chat in smaller groups around what stood out for you. I know that some of you, I'll try and remember who's been to both sessions and make sure that there's somebody in each group. And perhaps just share what you feel you could do better. That doesn't mean you need to do anything about that. Like the sprouting, I last sprouted when I was in South Africa, which was 3 years ago. So for 3 years, I know this is good for me, dirt cheap and super easy. Like it costs you the glass container once and then the seeds. And in the last week, I'm like, I can't believe I haven't done this, but I can. Just like Chantal said, we are all stressed and busy. So if this was really easy, we would all be getting this right. It's not. So perhaps let's have a little group discussion in small groups around what has stood out for you and how are you possibly going to take one thing from your time either today or between last week and today and create a shift in the way that you look after your gut.
Celynn, I'm just wondering if there might still be one or two questions before we do that for Chantal.
Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to ask quickly, on the sprouting, I've got those trays. Are those good to use, those sprouting trays rather than the jars?
It's far better to sprout in soil. So if you can't sprout in soil, sprouting in a glass jar is fine because you're getting the micronutrients, but you're not getting the trace elements from the soil. So fulvic acid, if you go and look on the Drip Bar blog, you'll see an article on fulvic acid. So organic soil contains fulvic acid, which is a very important a micronutrient for our body in terms of the removal of toxins and absorption of micronutrients. So organic soil contains fulvic acid, and we are all fulvic acid deficient because we are not taking in enough organic soil. So sprouting in bottles is great, but to have a little tray that would contain soil would be ideal. And then the soil obviously must be organic.
Sharon, I did hours and hours of watching YouTube figuring this out because I had the trays and I had 3 lots of sprouts that molded and I was annoyed. And so I have found a genius on YouTube who will talk you through soil. I'm not ready to do the soil yet. It's a bit too complicated for my tiny kitchen living in a flat in London. So you could start with glass, but absolutely the soil actually isn't as difficult as it sounds. You just need like 2 paper plates and a weight. But I'm doing this as a step 1, and I'm happy to share the link to this guy that I found on YouTube.
Please, would you?
I'll do
The soil.
Sure.
And then the other question I had was around bicarbonate of soda. I know a lot of people take that for indigestion and stuff like that instead of the other stuff like Gaviston and that. What is your view on bicarbonate of soda?
Okay, so bicarb is used actually to clean fridges and stuff like that. So it's processed, not ideal, also kind of seen as a medication. So it's about functional and integrative medicine in looking at why do I have the reflux? Let's not use the bicarb to put the plaster over the wound or the band-aid over the wound. Let's understand why. So even though it may be better, so Enos has bicarb in it. That's one of the components of it. So it's almost taking a lesser version of something, but you have gastric reflux. A person has gastric reflux because the digestive tract is not imbalanced. And so it's about finding out where that imbalance is and rectifying the cause of that, rather than doing a symptomatic treatment, if that answers your question.
Thank you.
Ashley wrote in the chat, are capsule probiotics still good? And that's a great question, because I think we chatted briefly about it last week, that in America and in certain parts of the UK, you can do poop in the post, where you will get feedback as to which of the gut bacteria are missing from your gut, and you would be able to match a specific probiotic with your missing gut bacteria. But knowing that they have only to date identified 500 different types of gut bacteria, and there are many, many, many more. So they are still limited in being able to identify exactly which ones are missing. And then in the space of probiotics, they haven't yet produced probiotics that exactly match which ones are missing. So the move towards fermented food is big, because you will get far more diverse cultures of bacteria, especially from kefir and kombucha, which are made from bacteria. Your starting point of kombucha is a SCOBY, which is a symbiotic colony of bacteria. So you get a far greater diversity, especially if, like in my kombucha brewery, we move the SCOBYs between the different ferments to ensure that we are getting the widest variety of healthy bacteria. So when you buy something in a tub from a pharmacy, you'll see that it'll either say a 9 strain or a 12 strain or a 15 strain. Whereas if you're taking a probiotic, a natural probiotic in a fermented food, you get an unlimited variety of bacteria. So your chances of reseeding your gut more holistically is better. And then I don't like plastic. BPAs are absolutely toxic for the body, and every single probiotic that you buy in the store comes in a plastic bottle.
So Chantal, Michael Mosley, a well-esteemed doctor in the UK, said the complete opposite of what you've just said. He said fermented foods, probably all the probiotics will sit in the gut, the upper part, and get digested and broken down because they're anaerobic, they get exposed to oxygen. You absolutely have to take a probiotic.
I know, so there's so much in this space. You know, just like the Tim Noakes and the Banting, you'll get those on the keto side, and then you'll get those on the other side. That the controversy is great to stimulate conversation, that we need to expose ourselves to different schools of thought. You will start to become partial to the way people think about certain things, the reasoning that they have. So I'm very much on the part of natural fermentation. There's a company called Seed who came out and said that fermented food is rubbish, you don't get natural probiotics in there, etc., etc. And then Seed produced their own probiotic that came in a bottle. So that's a perverse incentive. So it's also about understanding where everyone's coming from and which is what you relate to. So there are definitely different schools of thought.
Yeah, I think for me, the key is always the balance and to get individual advice. Because if you have a long history of, my mom, for instance, you know, really suffered with her skin and had very serious corticosteroid treatment. And in her case, she needed the extra probiotic to boost her initially. Whereas somebody perhaps like Fritz, who's, you know, I'm going to say super healthy, and you just want a little kickstart. Yeah, then having Sharon's fermented carrot, is that what you're making?
Yeah, and I'm wondering how long I must let it ferment. I noticed on the internet some people say let it ferment outside of the fridge for only 10 hours, and other people say 3 days, you know, so I'm a bit confused as to how long I should ferment these carrots outside the fridge.
When it starts clunking, it's done.
Yeah, you have to go by taste, because it's affected by so many things. The light in the room, the temperature of the room, the bacterial content on the carrots. If the carrots were chemically dipped before you cut them, then as opposed to being organic carrots, the bacterial content is low and then they ferment slower. So there is no recipe. You have to experiment.
Mr. Brian, what did you say? Well, they must clunk. What?
I just find when mine starts to almost have a bubbly smell to it, then it's mwah.
Yeah, mine have started bubbling now.
Yeah, that's the fermentation.
Bubbles are good. It's not just in champagne that bubbles are good.
So now the next step is to put it in a glass jar with a lid on in the fridge, right? Is that the next step?
Are you not fermenting in glass?
Yes, I am. But there's still this. But I've just got a cloth over the top.
Yeah. So it's fine. As soon as they taste fermented, you can start to eat them, and then you just put it in the fridge, and that will slow the fermentation process, but they'll continue to ferment, and then you just eat it until it doesn't taste nice anymore. And then you can use the liquid in your salad dressings.
And how much should one eat every day?
You want to start off with a small amount and then build up as you feel that you are comfortable with it. It's like moving to any kind of food that you would slowly introduce it to your body.
Yeah, you can't have too much of it.
You can, just like you wouldn't necessarily eat 2 kilograms of steak in a day or 3 tubs of yogurt, everything in moderation. You wouldn't sort of approach it from saying, oh, fermented food is healthy, let me eat 1 kilogram of my kimchi. Because that wouldn't be great.
It's not a 16-hour process then, guaranteed, Sharon.
I see Carly's got a question about apple cider vinegar.
I've heard a lot about it, but not sure how and why you have it. Yes, so apple cider vinegar. So a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar in a mug of warm filtered water in the morning before you have anything else flushes toxins out of your gastrointestinal tract. So very healthy from that point of view. Also having a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in 125 mils of water 15 to 20 minutes before a meal, if you do suffer from gastric reflux, will drop the acidity of your stomach and reduce your discomfort post that meal. And then the other thing about apple cider vinegar is that when it's diluted 4:1 and you soak your non-organic fruit and veg, it removes the pesticides from the skin.
Okay.
And it's also good to find an organic apple cider vinegar, like a good quality.
And it will come with a mother. If it's organic and raw, it comes with the SCOBY or the mother in it, which it continues to ferment.
And then if you happen to have, because I recently did some in-depth like genetic testing, and I think I have a histamine issue with my genes. So I may not benefit. In fact, I could be worsening my histamine reaction by having apple cider vinegar and fermented foods, which is fascinating. So I'm just exploring that. So once again, it just highlights, like I've got a dietitian in the US that is giving me guidance. So really the key message is to start with a few things and then to invest in speaking to someone who can look at your personal life.
Yeah, I think it's important, and I need to make a disclaimer that what we're sharing here is not health advice, that this is general lifestyle advice. And if you have an underlying condition, it would be very important that we work together one-on-one, where a full medical history is understood and that we go step by step in this, or that you consult a physician. I see somebody else, Brian, asked here, what causes gout? And so I'm going to say that it's high uric acid. And again, you were not born with high gout. So something in your system is leading to you producing more uric acid than you should. So the Puricos is, again, putting the Band-Aid over the wound. It's about identifying how and why. And so that would be beyond the scope of this discussion, because it would be very much a one-on-one. There's not only one cause, but you know that gout is known as rich man's disease.
Yeah.
It's the opulence of the red meat and the alcohol, Brian.
Guilty.
Yeah, there you go, Brian.
So I thought that there would be many more questions on the vagus nerve, because that is my absolute passion. Yeah. There are so many ways to stimulate the vagus nerve. It's become a very big thing. Stimulation of the vagus nerve. It's a form of therapy. And I think that just to take away from this as very valuable is that nose breathing and belly breathing and humming, anything that stimulates your voice box. So I'm currently working with a client who has got chronic fatigue, and she was very specific about telling me that the chronic fatigue started or worsened in August last year. And when I initially questioned her as to why she remembered August being so specific, she wasn't able to tell me. And then as we chatted more, she shared with me that she's a singer, and she stopped singing in her church choir in June last year. And so over those 2 months of June and July, the fact that she had less stimulation of the vagus nerve actually produced many of the symptoms that she's currently suffering from now. So there is so much to know about the vagus nerve and its amazing role in the body, and where those nuclear bombs of lifestyle cause inflammation in our gut. The vagus nerve, through its production of acetylcholine, actually does exactly the opposite, is that it's anti-inflammatory. It obviously switches off sympathetic dominance, and it also gets rid of free radicals in the body. So free radicals or oxidative stress cause tissue damage and aging and disease. And when your vagus nerve is functioning optimally, then you have a control of those free radicals in the body. And the free radicals are strongly linked to cognitive decline. So stimulation of the vagus nerve is definitely the new thing to be doing. Yeah, so just to remember that. So for anybody who's in sympathetic dominance, so you know that by type A personalities, sweating palms, high heart rates, taping your mouth is very beneficial. So when you're working at home, put tape over your mouth to force you to breathe through your nose, and you'll see initially how difficult that is. And people who struggle to sleep, it's a good idea actually to start taping your mouth during the day so that you get used to it, and then to tape your mouth at night when you sleep, because that nose breathing will assist you in getting over sleep apneas and snoring and waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning. But you definitely would not tape your mouth before you sleep as the very first time, because yeah, you'll wake up having to rip that tape off and dying for air.
Yeah, Sharon, it will also help you avoid snackcidents, maybe. And the humming, I don't know if anybody else saw it. It was this video that went viral. It was a father lying in bed with a baby who was having a very rough time. This baby was screeching. And the father took a deep breath in and he went, hum. He just hummed as he exhaled, and the baby went from screaming to
Calm.
fast asleep. It reminded me about... So, you get meditations that include chanting and humming, and those are lovely ways, or joining online rock choir classes. And it's true, we don't express and hum and use our voice.
Yeah. And then I'll also show you the 8 tapping points in the body that stimulate. So the one is on the side of the wrist. So it's not, you don't have to tap very hard. And I'm using 4 fingers and just very lightly tapping on the side of my wrist. Then the other one is taking 3 fingers and tapping on the apex of your head. And then the third point is where your eyebrows start. So taking 2 fingers, both hands, and tapping not too lightly, and it must not be painful. It's stimulatory. And I'm talking now, but while you're doing this, you would have your mouth closed and you would be breathing in and out through your nose. And then just on the edge of the eye underneath is your 4th point. And then your lip crease. And then your chin crease. So just that line below the bottom lip. And then it's just below your collarbones on your neck. So there's the bumps of your collarbone. So just underneath there, also using 3 fingers. So it's almost where you would put a lapel mic. And then the last point is taking 4 fingers and just at the base of the armpit. So doing one hand at a time. So those are all vagal nerve stimulation points. So when you are feeling stressed, you've had an awful phone call or somebody's really stressed you out, it's a good thing, even while you're chatting with them, not necessarily to start tapping your forehead, but certainly the side of your hand is a good vagal stimulation point to reduce the production of cortisol and adrenaline.
Chantal, have you come across Feldenkrais as a form of relaxation? Because I did my first class on Monday night. That's the joy of the situation we find ourselves in, is that we have access to things online that we would never have. And that was all based on breathing and vagal nerve stimulation. It was, so I
put it into the chat so we can see how you spell it. Yeah.
Feldenkrais. There's a lady called Rachel Blackman that runs very affordable classes on rest and vagal nerve stuff.
Are you putting that in there?
I am, yeah. Rachel Blackman. Best £10 I spent this week.
Haha.
Only £10 I spent this week, actually. Any more questions? Because I'm sensing that actually it's great to be in the group like this rather than in smaller groups. On a practical note, Chantal, I know from, speaking to so many people around their diet that eating more color can be overwhelming. So what would be like your top tips realistically, knowing people are stressed and busy, to include more fiber and color?
So your greatest sources of fiber are chia seeds, hemp seeds, unrefined hemp seeds, and goji berries. So generally, if I ask clients, where does your fiber come from? 90% of people say muesli. And unless it's homemade muesli is not a good source of fiber and very high in sugar and also hydrogenated fat. So store-bought muesli, not a good idea. The other thing that people will say is jacket potatoes or the skin of sweet potato. So although that's high, it's certainly not the highest. So if you Google foods high in fiber, you must say per 100 grams. So chia seeds is like 17 grams of fiber per 100 grams. Hemp seeds, very high. Goji berries, very high. And then avocados actually are also very high in fiber. Yeah. And then you asked another question. Was it just
a question about the chia?
Yes, and then the foods are called G-bombs actually. So it's greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds. So if you eat the G-bombs every day, then that is good. So greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, big mushrooms.
Magic
berries.
mushrooms.
No, not magic mushrooms.
A little bit of magic mushrooms, Brian, is okay. Psychedelic drugs are making it to the boardroom.
It's G-bombs, Celynn.
Sorry, I know. I'm busy rectifying that. Must chia seeds be soaked? Is a question from Michelle.
No, you can sprinkle them on salads. You can put it into food. You can make a chia pudding. You can have them however you want them, however you want to have them.
Should they be milled or crushed before? Because I've heard that chia seeds can pass through the whole system without being touched if they're still in whole form.
So not if you have a good transit time, not if your digestive system is working well. So no crushing of the chia seeds in the rawest form possible.
I'll leave them raw.
Yeah. The insoluble fiber. And the same with hemp seed. Like hemp powder is good, but hemp seeds are even better.
Can I just check what the S was on the G-bombs?
Seeds.
So it's green beans.
It's greens.
Greens and beans. Okay.
Green beans, onions. So those are all the the allium family. So your chives, your garlic, your onion, your spring onion, and then mushrooms of every kind: shiitake, shimeji, lion's mane, chaga. They're all so beneficial. Mushrooms are also the new 21st century food. And then your berries. So those are very high in antioxidants. And your seeds.
Seeds.
Yeah, and actually, mushroom coffee is cool, except there won't be much fiber in that.
And that also brings up the question of juicing. So you are far better off making a smoothie in a NutriBullet than you are juicing, because juicing takes all the fiber out of the fruit. So it also increases the sugar concentration. Although it's natural sugar, it still will boost your blood sugar. And unless you're going to eat the pulp afterwards, it's not a great idea. So
really, wow.
Yeah, the cold pressed juices are great. Like if you're on the run and you feel like you need a sugar boost, because they are all natural, but you're getting absolutely no fiber. So juicing is not a good thing from a fiber intake point of view. We need to the only way that used hormones get out of the body is by binding to insoluble fiber. So the bile duct, so say for example, you've had a very stressful episode. Your body produces high amounts of cortisol and adrenaline. Once your body calms down, that adrenaline and cortisol moves into the liver, where the liver processes it, and then the liver dumps the processed hormones via the bile duct into the large intestine. And if there is no insoluble fiber to which those used hormones can bind in order to be eliminated, they will be reabsorbed through the epithelial cells. And instead of starting at zero with your adrenaline and cortisol, that's how you can land up getting adrenal fatigue. One is sustained stress, sustained sympathetic dominance, but the other is insufficient dietary fiber to remove the processed hormones. So women who talk about hormonal balance, my hormones are out, fiber is fundamental.
And on that note, I think this is so clear that this is such a personalized journey. And Chantal, thank you for sharing so much knowledge with us. There's definitely, between last week and today, and both recordings are available if you want to watch them or share them, lots that we can take from. But ultimately, when we send the thank you note as an email, I've written a note to include the link to the YouTube for the sprouting. And I will also include Chantal's contact details. If anybody here wants to have a one-on-one conversation with her, I highly recommend that. It's a really good investment in your well-being.
No, thank you. Wow, what awesome knowledge, Chantal. And I've learned such a lot today.
Great.
And if anybody has any, or even Chantal, if you have questions around resources in the UK, I can maybe help with that, because Chantal's based in South Africa. But in terms of one-on-one advice on your lifestyle, I highly recommend that you consider spending some time with Chantal.
Maybe Chantal's email could be put into the chat box quickly.
Chantal, or I'll copy and paste it before we.
And then you can also find me on _drip bar on Instagram. And I found you a kombucha source in the UK, which I'll share with Celynn. And you must all follow Gemma Newman, Dr. Gemma Newman. It's GEMMA. I'll put it in here. So she's Dr. Gemma Newman. And the kombucha brewer in the UK.
Chantal, you've put it to me privately, but thank you.
Brian, you're so special.
Thanks for the phone number as well.
And you said that we can find you on Instagram as _drip bar or drip bar.
The underscore drip bar.
Okay.
So we post a lot of stuff about gut health, recipes, vegan recipes on our blog. Celynn, I'll share it with you when I find it, the kombucha brewer in the UK, and then you can share it with everyone.
Great, we'll do that because we'll have everybody's email address if you registered, so we'll send a thank you note.
Cool.
One quick question. Have you heard of Berkey filters?
Berkeley.
Yeah.
No.
Berkey filters.
Berkey.
Yeah, they're absolutely phenomenal.
Okay, available in South Africa.
Yeah, you can get them there if you need it. I've got the contact details there, but I've got here as well.
Water filters.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely essential. Absolutely essential. Nobody must drink tap water.
Brian, will you send me the link and I'll include it in the thank you note so there's maybe a little package in one place?
Yeah, sure.
And on that note, I sadly have to close the cafe because I've got another cafe to open.
Thank you so much.
Charlie.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Michelle. Cheers, Pat. Bye, Fab.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, Celynn. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.